Good evening. Tonight we have a very special investigative report that is also quite personal. For years I've heard stories from friends, mainly senior citizens, who have received stacks of suspicious mail promising riches from lotteries. Some would even get phone calls saying they had won prize money. Clearly there was a story here, but I had no idea how big a story it was. For the past several months, my reporting team and I have been digging into what we found out to be a sophisticated web of scams that are international in scope. Conservative estimates put the damage in the hundreds of millions of dollars a year. Victims can be found in every state of the union, and the cost is not just financial. These con artists are cowards who prey on some of the most vulnerable members of our society. And if you want to know the personal heartbreak these scammers cause, you only have to meet Norman Bridenbaugh.
Whether they ever catch him or not, I don't know. Time will tell. If they do, I hope they hang him from the highest tree there is, because that's what they deserve.
It's been a year since Norman Bridenbaugh lost everything, including this house, where he and his late wife Cindy were married in 1986.
We had only known each other 6 weeks when we got married. And we've been married a little over 22 years when she died. And she died with cancer and dementia, Alzheimer's.
As his wife's health was failing, he got a call that seemed to offer some hope. The voice on the other end told him he and his wife had won a $2.5 million lottery. If they paid a few processing fees, the money was theirs. And Norman believed it.
They just made everything sound as good as they could. Oh, they were good, God-fearing people, and they went to church, and they'd swear on their mother's grave and all that kind of stuff, that they were being honest and above board.
But they weren't. And by this point, Cindy's dementia had become severe. Norman had little choice but to put her in a nursing home, leaving him alone in their house, listening to the voice on the other end of the phone telling him their winnings could pay for the care to bring his wife home. Just a few more fees, some taxes, and they could claim their windfall. But the prize money never came. The bank foreclosed on their house in 2011, and now Norman lives here, in the basement of a former neighbor.
It was rough, trying to take care of her and trying to get these son of bitches to come through with what they were promising. Because I was sending them every damn thing I could send them.
All told, scammers took Norman for $400,000, including the loss of his home. Norman had taken out a reverse mortgage to raise cash to keep up with his payments to the scammers, which leads to the central question of this story. How could something like this happen?
You know, we used to say, whatever you do, don't give your credit card out over the phone. Now we say, whatever you do, don't engage in a personal conversation about your family and yourself with someone you don't know, because that is the starting point of these frauds.
Doug Shadell has spent decades investigating fraud for AARP. With a membership of about 38 million, it is the leading advocacy group for seniors.
How's it going today?
It's going quite well.
Yeah? You made any calls? Or?
I haven't.
Here in Seattle, AARP has a call center where volunteers, called fraud fighters, counsel seniors who have been victimized by con artists.
You wouldn't believe, I've been making these phone calls for months now, and I've talked to one person that lost $150,000.
She claims to have lost $50,000.
The Seattle call center has a team of 72 volunteers who have spoken with more than 10,000 victims of frauds and scams since opening their doors in 2006.
This woman lost $1,500. This woman lost $4,500.
What is the single most important thing you think Americans need to know about seniors and fraud?
Never get started with it. When you get a piece of mail, for example, that says you might have won something, it isn't a benign act to respond to that, because what you're doing when you respond to it, even if it's sending $5 in, is you're telling the bad guy, I'm someone who does this, and you're separating yourself out from someone who does this for someone who doesn't do this. That gets a big red X on your back, and now you're being targeted by the really bad guys.
While the most financially crippling fraud usually ends up taking place over the phone, as we saw in the case of Norman Breidenball, it can often start with mailings like these. We've all gotten them. They seem harmless. But those who look out for the well-being of seniors know how quickly these come-ons can escalate.
The very first day that I worked at AARP, this is about 20 years ago, the Federal Express driver who delivers to our office came in and said, I understand you work on fraud issues, and there's a lady about a mile from here who's getting a lot of packages. Would you go visit her? And I went and visited her. Long story short, she had spent $150,000 in the last 9 months on these scams. Started with a simple letter, hey, you might have won the Australian lottery. Send in $19, seems like a benign thing to do. She sends in $19, and within a week she's getting 20 letters a day. That was 20 years ago, and it still continues today. Raise your hand if you've ever gotten a piece of mail that says you may have won a prize. I'm not saying you fell for it. How many of you have ever gotten a call saying you may have won something, anything? How many of you, now let's be honest, how many of you, at least in the back of your mind, wondered, could this be true? Of course, right? I mean, and who wouldn't want to win the El Gordo Spanish lottery and get $1 million? You know, who wouldn't want that? I mean, I would.
On this particular afternoon, dozens of seniors crowd into a meeting room at an assisted living facility in Seattle. Shadell and AARP representatives across the country often take their message to groups like this.
We've got some new information about how these people do this. We've done a lot of research. We've interviewed con men. We've intercepted tape recordings of bad guys.
This strategy, educating potential victims and warning them to be cautious, seems obvious.
The first thing I would say is,
You tell seniors how the scams work, they stop falling for them.
never make a buying decision at the time of the sales pitch, period.
But it isn't always that simple. Sherry Crossland is a social worker at the Senior Center.
I know for a fact that we have people in this building who have paid money, lost money, given away money.
But when we asked to talk to some of these victims, nobody came forward. Sherry knows these people well and shared the story of a woman whose life savings had been wiped out by fraud.
I'm thinking of one woman in particular who every couple of weeks she'll bring us a bag about this big, full of all the offers, sweepstakes, you've won $1 million. And when you show her these and you say, can you see how this isn't real? Do you see how they're doing this and they're trying to get you in to do this and they want you to spend money to get the winnings? Her response is, but maybe this is the one.
According to the Federal Trade Commission, about 92% of lottery fraud victims never come forward.
Well, your husband got taken by these things, huh?
Why is it that so few of these cases ever get reported? I mean, someone gets scammed. Finally, they realize they've been had. But so seldom they come forward. Why is that?
I think it's a combination of embarrassment. Many folks, as they get older, are worried that if somebody finds out that they did this thing, then they may not be able to keep their independence. But also the con men tell them not to say anything. They are very directive and very aggressive at saying, listen, don't tell anyone you've won this money, because then they'll come and try and take it from you.
What's going on? Why do you keep avoiding my call? And every time I hear my voice, you throw away the phone.
I was going through a bad time and I didn't want to talk to anybody.
So are you okay?
Yeah, I'll be okay.
What you are witnessing is a real call between a victim and her scammer. Pat Coffin and a man she's never met have been talking almost daily for 6 weeks, arranging the details of her supposed winnings. She's been told the prize includes a Mercedes-Benz that needs to be delivered to her home in northern Maine.
Everything, as I say, everything went through processing smoothly and everything. So right now we're back. I'm not really in Maine right now, but I'm getting there. I'm in Connecticut, and Connecticut is not far away.
Pat has already sent this man thousands of dollars for what he told her were taxes, customs, and other fees necessary for her to get her prize. The man, who calls himself Joe Johnson, has even conned Pat into believing that he's taking care of her.
Because you are so close in receiving your prize and you've been a very good customer, I went out of the way. Even my manager asked me, do I really trust you like that? I said, of course I do. She's not just a client, she's a friend also.
For a while, Pat believed it all. The winnings, the sense of friendship, her good fortune. But no longer. This call is being recorded, and not just for the benefit of our cameras. What Joe Johnson doesn't know is that he and his phone calls are now part of a law enforcement investigation.
He called me on the phone on December 8th and told me that I had won the Publishers Clearinghouse for $2,500,000 and a Mercedes-Benz. I said, oh, good. Isn't that nice? I finally won something. And in those words, in that amount of enthusiasm, because I usually don't believe anything I hear until I see it.
Pat's story is a perfect example of how these scams work. Of course, this wasn't the real Publishers Clearinghouse, and she showed us many of the receipts for the money she sent to Joe Johnson. There were wire transfers.
These are the Western Unions.
And something known as green dot cards, a popular brand of prepaid debit card.
And you scratch off the back. There's a place there. It has a whole bunch of numbers. And he would ask me for the numbers.
And once the scammers have the numbers, your money is theirs. The first call from Joe Johnson came just days before Pat's 64th birthday, amidst the anxiety and stress of the Christmas season. Pat Coffin has never had much money. When we met her, she was working full-time as a housekeeper at a local nursing home. She told us when Joe Johnson called, she was tired, her arthritis had been acting up, and that this time of year is always hard for her. She now understands that Joe Johnson caught her at an especially vulnerable time. The first fee he asked for was $250. It wasn't easy for her to pay it, but she did because she really believed she had won millions of dollars. Then a couple of days later, he called back, saying she had to pay another $500 fee.
I said, well, I don't have any more money. He says, well, do you have credit cards? I said, yeah. He said, well, you can get cash advance off those.
Incremental and persistent demands for money. That's how these con artists squeeze their victims out of money they don't even have, all the while promising the prize winnings are just around the corner.
By Christmas time, or well, a few days before Christmas, I think I'm up to 2,000 or 2,500, 2,700, I don't know. And all this time he's telling me to keep my mouth shut because he don't want anybody to find out about this because they might follow it up, you know.
For scammers like Joe Johnson, it's all about bonding and building trust with their victims. And they will use whatever psychological tools they can to do it.
We built a relationship because he told me about his wife leaving him and taking his children and having been divorced and with a husband that cheated on me. And my children, my oldest one, when he turned 15, looks at me, he's 6 foot tall. He looks down at me and he says, Mom, he says, I need to go live with Dad because he can keep me in line.
Joe Johnson had tapped into a deep emotional scar from Pat's past. When her sons were young, they left her to live with her ex-husband. Through her tears, Pat told us how she allowed herself to slide into alcoholism because of it. And now, Joe Johnson was telling her that his wife had taken his children away.
I empathized with him because I had gone through that. And I told him life does go on, or, you don't give up on it, because he sounded very depressed. So I was trying to tell him life goes on after, you don't do something stupid just because of somebody.
You hear from your children? I mean, don't mean to turn it on to a bad subject, but...
I mean, my daughter sneaked and called me, and she told me that where they are right now, they're not liking it, and they miss me and all those stuff. I was actually crying. I didn't even go to work for a day. I called it.
Being Christmas time, being my birthday, being I've never had money, being I wanted to help my grandchildren and help my children, being overtired from work and trying to get Christmas ready, I just had bad judgment on my part and was gullible.
For 6 weeks, Pat did what Joe Johnson told her. She talked with him almost every day. But one night, she saw a local news report about these types of scams and contacted the police. They told her to stop answering the phone. That's when she saw another side of Joe Johnson.
Pat, are you ignoring my calls? Pat, answer the phone because I know you're home. Hello, Pat? Me again. You went to your workplace. You are not work. Hello, Pat? I know I'm getting pretty frustrated right now. Need to know what's going on. Hello, Pat? Hello? Pat, what the fuck wrong with you? I don't want to answer the damn phone.
Do any of you understand why I was a little on the afraid side?
Pat lives in a trailer park in a rural part of the state, and she didn't know for sure where her scammer was. After all, he had left her messages saying he was nearby and bringing the car to her personally. She worried she might be in serious danger.
I didn't know where he said he was in Presque Isle, and I live alone, and these doors are not terribly reliable. So I put a chair in front of the door and put cans on top of it so it would wake me up in case somebody tried to get in.
These people are nothing more than professional, ruthless thieves. They prey on elderly people. They have a sob story that works, or a pickup line, however you want to call it. I explained to Mrs. Coffin that if she had been a man, he would have had some other story to lure her in. They bond with them.
Dan Robertson was the detective assigned to Pat's case.
I guessed what she was going to tell me from past experience, and I called her on the phone and made arrangements to meet her, and I went to her work.
With the encouragement of the police, Pat started talking to Joe Johnson again. But this time, the goal was to record the conversations for evidence. With Pat back in touch, Joe Johnson once again became friendly.
Then we're going to have to stop in main process again and then come over.
And then you're going to want some more money?
No.
Or another card?
Sweetheart, just don't worry
No,
about
I'm asking.
anything, all right?
Huh?
Don't worry about anything, all right? Everything is covered. I told you that the only thing is left right now is that delivery fee.
Of course, there was another fee. Their relationship had always been about her sending him more money.
All right, so the only thing that's left now is the delivery fee. After the delivery fee is taken care of.
And how much is the delivery fee?
It's just one card, a $500 card.
$500 card, huh? One of the Green Dot Money Pack cards again?
Yes, Green Dot Money Pack scratch card.
Yeah.
Is that too much for you?
Yeah. I told you last time that I was out of money.
With Pat emboldened, suddenly Joe Johnson's story started to seem full of holes. He said he was inside a hotel room in Connecticut. but there's a rooster crowing in the background. When she asked about it, he said there was a cockfight going on.
They have a whole lot of them here. They use them to gamble or cockfight or whatever.
Oh, really? Oh, that's cruel.
From statements he made, there was a sense he wasn't quite sure where he was.
I don't want to stay in this country, this state too long. So damn cold up here. Connecticut, Maine, New Hampshire. These states are too cold for me.
Experts told us that scammers often use tools like Google Maps to make their victims think they are nearby, but they're not. Joe Johnson was in Jamaica, a country that law enforcement says has now become the epicenter of where these scams originate. And that makes these crimes almost impossible to prosecute.
He might as well be on Mars. It's extremely frustrating because he's in a foreign country, and even if I had the authority, the jurisdiction to go down there, we don't have the financial ability to send an officer to Jamaica. Our prosecutor, our district attorney, has told me on previous cases, if you can identify a suspect, a respondent, and develop probable cause, and that person is in the continental United States of America, we will prosecute. But he's not.
When we return, we head to the shores of Jamaica in search of the scammers. That part of our investigation is next.